May 15th, 1945. Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. 2:47 in the afternoon. Sergeant Robert Henderson stood in the doorway of Mess Hall B, watching something he would never forget for the rest of his life. Across the room alone at a wooden table near the windows sat a German prisoner of war. Tall, thin, maybe 30 years old. His Wehrmacht uniform had been replaced weeks ago with plain work clothes, but he still sat with the rigid posture of an officer. In front of him, on a standard-issue military plate, was a slice of apple pie, still warm from the oven. A scoop of vanilla ice cream melting slowly down the sides, pulling at the base of the golden crust. The German was not eating. He was crying. Not the loud, desperate sobbing of a broken man. Not the theatrical weeping Buck had seen from soldiers trying to get sympathy. This was different. Silent tears running down his face as he stared at the pie like it was the most dangerous thing he had ever encountered. Buck had never seen before. Terror mixed Buck had never seen before. Terror mixed with longing, shame mixed with hunger. A man at war with himself over a piece of dessert. Buck had served 3 years in the European theater. He had seen men die in his arms. He had seen cities reduced to rubble. He had seen things that would wake him up sweating in the middle of the night for decades to come. But he had never in all his life seen a grown man cry over a slice of apple pie. Private Jimmy Torres stood beside Buck, watching the same scene with confusion written across his young face. "What the hell is wrong with him?" Jimmy whispered. "I don't know," Buck said quietly, "but something is about to change." The German Buck would later learn his name was Hauptmann Werner Adler, finally moved. His hand trembled as it reached for the fork. He picked it up, set it down, picked it up again, cut a small piece from the tip of the slice where the apples were soft and cinnamon sweet, brought the fork halfway to his mouth, stopped, his jaw clenched, his eyes closed, and then with the careful deliberation of a man defusing a bomb, he brought the fork the rest of the way. He tasted it and broke down completely. His face crumpled. The fork clattered it to the plate. Both hands came up to cover his face as his whole body bent forward, shaking with sobs that could no longer be silent. Men at nearby tables turned to look, some with concern, some with confusion, some with the cold satisfaction of seeing an enemy brought low. But Buck saw something else. He saw a man whose entire world had just shattered. Not from cruelty, not from violence, but from kindness. What you are about to hear is one of the most powerful untold stories of World War II. A story about 3 German women and 1 German officer who came to America expecting hell and found something that shattered everything they believed about freedom, kindness, and what it truly means to be American. This is not a story about victory through violence. It is a story about victory through values. About how a plate of food prepared with care in a prisoner of war camp in rural Wisconsin became the weapon that won hearts and changed minds in ways that bombs and bullets never could. But before Werner Adler could taste that pie, before he could experience the moment that would transform him from a loyal Nazi officer into a man who questioned everything he would have to survive 3 days of self-imposed starvation. 3 days of watching his fellow prisoners eat while he refused every meal. 3 days of pride battling hunger until his body began to shut down and his mind began to crack. And it all started on a freezing January morning when 3 German women stepped off a train in Wisconsin, their hands numb from cold, their stomachs empty from months of wartime rationing, and their hearts filled with a terror they could not name. January 17th, 1945. The war in Europe was entering its final brutal months. In Germany, cities were being bombed around the clock. The Eastern Front was collapsing. The Western Front was crumbling. Millions of soldiers and civilians were caught in the grinding machinery of a war that everyone knew was lost, but no one dared admit was over. And in the cargo hold of a military transport ship crossing the Atlantic, 3 German women who had been captured in North Africa and occupied Europe were about to discover that everything they had been taught about their enemy was a lie. Meet our 3 main characters. Greta Hoffman, 28 years old, former Luftwaffe radio operator, sharp mind, defiant spirit, unshakable loyalty to Germany. The daughter of a Wehrmacht colonel, she had grown up in a world where duty was sacred and obedience was survival. She had lost her mother and her infant son in the Allied bombing of Hamburg in 1943. The fire had consumed them while she was working at a military radio station 200 kilometers away. She had received the news via telegram. 3 lines. Mother deceased, child deceased, condolences. She had not cried. She had filed the telegram in her desk drawer and returned to work because that was what you did. You buried your grief. You served the fatherland. You believed what you were told. Americans are brutal. Americans torture prisoners. Americans will humiliate you and starve you and break you because that is what enemies do. Greta believed every word. Anna Weber, 24 years old, Army nurse, gentle face that had seen too much death, soft voice that had spoken too many final words to dying men. She had worked in field hospitals from France to Tunisia, treating soldiers who arrived in pieces, watching boys her own age bleed out on tables she could not keep clean enough. Her younger brother had vanished somewhere on the Eastern Front, missing in action, presumed dead. No body, no confirmation, just absence. Anna had stopped believing in God sometime around the 4th or 5th time she had held a dying soldier's hand and lied to him that everything would be fine. She had stopped believing in Germany around the same time. She had stopped believing in anything except survival. Get through the day, get through the night, maybe if you were lucky, get through the war. She did not expect kindness. She did not expect mercy. She expected exactly what the propaganda had promised. Cruelty from the Americans. Pain from the Americans. Maybe death from the Americans. And if death came, at least it would be rest. Margaret Klein, everyone called her Marga, 32 years old, military clerk, war widow, practical, protective, fierce in the way mothers are fierce when the world threatens their children. Her husband had died at Stalingrad in 1943, frozen to death in a trench during the worst winter of the war. She had received his last letter 3 weeks after he died. It was brief. He was cold. He missed her. He was sorry. He knew he was not coming home. Take care of our daughter. The letter was stained with something dark that might have been blood or might have been mud. Marga had not opened it again after the first reading. She kept it in a tin box under her bed next to her wedding ring and a photograph of her daughter. Lotte, 6 years old, living with Marga's mother in Munich, a city being bombed every week. Every day Marga spent in captivity was a day she could not protect her child. Every moment away was agony. Every thought of Lotte's small face asking where Mama had gone was a knife twisting in her chest. Marga did not care about politics. She did not care about ideology. She cared about getting home. She cared about surviving long enough to hold her daughter again. And if that meant eating American food and obeying American guards and pretending to be compliant, then that was what she would do. She would do anything to get back to Lotte. Anything. The train pulled into Fort McCoy just after dawn. Steam hissed from the engine. Snow covered everything. The platform, the roofs of the buildings, the tops of the barbed wire fences that stretched in neat geometric lines around the perimeter of the camp. The temperature was 18 degrees below 0 Celsius. Cold enough that breathing hurt. Cold enough that the moisture in your nose froze when you inhaled. Cold enough that exposed skin turned numb in seconds. The 3 women stepped off the train into a world of white and gray and bitter cold. They wore thin coats that had been designed for North African winters, not Wisconsin in January. They wore shoes with soles worn smooth from months of marching. They carried small bags containing everything they owned, a change of clothes, a bar of soap if they were lucky, letters from home if those letters had survived the journey. Nothing else. You learned to travel light when you were running from bombs. American guards lined the platform. Rifles slung over shoulders, breath fogging in the frozen air. No shouting, no violence, just efficiency. Cold military precision without the cruelty Greta had been trained to expect. One guard stepped forward. Corporal Frank O'Brien, 25 years old. Boston accent thick enough to cut. He held a clipboard and read names from a typed list. Hoffman, Greta. Here, Greta said, her voice flat, her eyes forward. Weber, Anna. Here, Anna whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Klein, Margarete. Here, Marga said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. They stepped forward when called. They did not look at each other. They did not speak. They had learned early in their captivity that silence was safest. O'Brien checked their names off the list and gestured toward a waiting truck. Transport to barracks, he said. Someone will show you where to go. Marga whispered to Anna in German. Stay close. Do not trust them. Anna nodded, but something was already wrong. The guards were not acting like conquerors. They were not shouting orders or shoving prisoners into line. They were not laughing at the women's fear or taking pleasure in their discomfort. They were just doing a job, processing arrivals, checking names, moving people from point A to point B with the same bored efficiency of factory workers on an assembly line. It was deeply unsettling. One soldier, Private James Crawford, 22 years old with a Tennessee drawl that turned every sentence into music, picked up Anna's bag when she stumbled on a patch of ice. Careful, ma'am, he said, handing it back to her with a small smile. Anna stared at him. Did he just call me ma'am? Did an American soldier just show her courtesy? She looked at Marga. Marga's face was unreadable, but her eyes were sharp and watchful. This is a trick, those eyes said. Do not trust it. The truck bed was cold metal. The women sat on wooden benches that ran along the sides. The engine roared to life and they began moving through the camp. Greta looked out at rows of identical barracks, painted white, clean, organized. Smoke rising from chimneys, which meant heat inside, which meant the buildings were not freezing, which meant the Americans were wasting fuel on prisoner comfort, which made no sense at all. Why would you waste resources keeping prisoners warm unless the propaganda was wrong? Greta pushed the thought away. Dangerous thinking, the kind of thinking that got you killed. Stay focused, stay loyal, trust nothing. The truck stopped outside a long building marked Women's Barracks C. Another guard, this one older, maybe 40, with kind eyes and weathered hands, opened the back gate and helped them down. Watch your step, ladies. Ice is slick this morning. Inside you will find bunks and blankets. Dinner is at 1800 hours. That is 6 p.m. Mess hall is that building there. He pointed to a structure, 3 buildings down. You will hear a bell. Just follow the other prisoners. He said it all so calmly, so normally, like he was giving directions to a hotel. Greta wanted to scream at him. We are your enemies. We are Germans. We worked for the regime you are fighting. Why are you being nice to us? But she said nothing. She picked up her bag and walked into the barracks. The interior was a shock. Not because it was luxurious. It was not. The space was plain, functional. Rows of metal bunk beds with thin mattresses. Wooden floors swept clean. Small windows with glass that was not broken. A pot-bellied stove in the center of the room radiating heat into the space. But it was warm, actually warm. Not the desperate borderline warmth of huddling under insufficient blankets. Not the fleeting warmth of standing near a fire before returning to freezing quarters. Real warmth, comfortable warmth. The kind of warmth that seeped into your bones and made your muscles unclench. On each bunk was a folded wool blanket, clean, thick, no holes, no stains, real blankets, and pillows, actual pillows. Marga ran her hand over the blanket on the nearest bunk. It was soft, it smelled like soap, it was clean. When was the last time she had touched something this clean? Greta stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, taking inventory. Beds, blankets, heat, windows with glass, a door that closed properly. No rats, no lice, no smell of decay. This is a trick, she said in German. They want us to relax. They want us to feel safe. Then they will come for us. Interrogations. Torture. They are waiting for us to let our guard down. Anna sat on the edge of a lower bunk. Maybe she said quietly, or maybe they just gave us a place to sleep. Do not be naive, Greta snapped. This is the enemy. Marga was not listening. She was staring at something tucked under her pillow. A small piece of paper. She pulled it out. It was a handwritten note in broken German. The grammar was terrible, but the intent was clear. Frühstück 6:30, mess hall, willkommen. Breakfast at 6:30. Mess hall, welcome. It was signed in Corporal O'Brien in a loose scrawl. Marga held the note like it might explode. Breakfast, she said. They are giving us breakfast. Greta took the note and read it. Her face hardened. It is bait. They are testing us, seeing who will come, who will comply, who will resist. Or Anna said, still sitting on the bunk with her eyes closed, they are just telling us when to eat. Outside the window, they could see American soldiers walking past, talking, laughing. One lit a cigarette and shared it with his buddy. No fear on their faces, no tension in their movements. Just men doing a job. Men who looked like they were not particularly worried about anything. It looked normal. That was the most disturbing part. It looked normal. Anna whispered, "They do not look like they hate us." Greta turned away from the window. "Of course not. They are trained to act civilized. Wait until tomorrow. Wait until they start the real questioning." But Marga was not convinced. She was thinking about Lotte, thinking about survival. And survival meant paying attention, meant noticing when something did not match the pattern you expected. The pattern said Americans were cruel. The pattern said prisoners would be starved and beaten and broken. But the evidence said otherwise. Real blankets, real heat, a note saying welcome. Either the propaganda was wrong or this was the most elaborate psychological trap ever devised. Marga decided to wait and see. That night, the three women lay in their bunks fully clothed, ready to run if soldiers came, ready to fight if interrogators arrived, ready for the nightmare to begin. But nothing happened. The barracks stayed warm. The night stayed quiet. No one came to drag them away. No one came to hurt them. The only sound was wind outside and the soft breathing of other prisoners who had arrived before them and were already asleep in nearby bunks. At 3 in the morning, Anna woke up screaming. Not loud. She had learned years ago how to scream quietly. But Greta and Marga woke instantly, hands reaching for weapons that were not there, eyes scanning for threats that did not exist. Anna sat up, shaking, tears on her face. "The dream again?" Marga asked quietly. Anna nodded. She did not need to explain. They all had the dreams. Bombs falling, buildings burning, faces of people they could not save. The dreams were always the same, always terrible, always waiting just beneath the surface of sleep. Greta lay back down, staring at the ceiling. "Get control of yourself," she said coldly. "We cannot show weakness." Marga sat beside Anna on the bunk. "She is not weak," Marga said. "She is human. Maybe you should try it sometime." Greta did not respond, but her hands were shaking too. She hid them under the blanket where no one could see. At 6 a.m. a bugle sounded across the camp. Reveille. The women got up, washed their faces in a communal bathroom that had running water and mirrors and sinks that drained properly. Hot water, actual hot water that came out of the taps when you turned them. Anna stood at the sink, letting hot water run over her hands for a full minute, just feeling the heat, trying to remember the last time she had washed with hot water. It had been months, maybe a year. They lined up outside for roll call. Corporal O'Brien stood with his clipboard in the weak morning light. "Hoffman, here. Weber, here. Klein, here," Good O'Brien said. "Breakfast in 30 minutes. Do not be late." He walked away. No inspection, no threats, no speeches about obedience or punishment, just information delivered in a neutral tone, and then he was gone. Anna looked at Marga with confusion. "That is it." Apparently, Marga said. Greta said nothing, but her mind was racing. "It is a test. They are watching to see who breaks formation, who talks, who shows resistance. They are gathering intelligence on us." Or maybe Marga said tiredly, "It is just roll call." In 30 minutes, they would walk to the mess hall. In 30 minutes, they would discover what breakfast meant. But first, they had to walk past something that would shake them more than any interrogation could. They had to walk past a group of American soldiers playing basketball in the freezing cold, laughing like they did not have a care in the world. The walk to the mess hall took less than 3 minutes, but it changed everything. The three women moved in a tight group, shoulders almost touching, eyes forward, trying to be invisible the way prisoners learn to be invisible. The morning air was sharp enough to burn their lungs. Their breath came out in white clouds. Their feet crunched on snow that had been packed down by hundreds of boots before theirs. And then they heard it. Laughter, not cruel laughter, not the mocking laughter of guards tormenting prisoners. Just ordinary human laughter. The kind that comes from genuine amusement. The kind that sounds like life instead of survival. They turned their heads toward the sound and stopped walking. On an outdoor basketball court, a concrete slab that had been swept clear of snow, 12 American soldiers were playing a chaotic, joyful game. Some had removed their jackets despite the freezing temperature. Their breath fogged the air around them like steam engines. They were shouting, trash-talking, playing with the intensity of men who had nothing more important to do than win this meaningless game. One soldier, tall and lanky with red hair, missed a shot badly. The ball bounced off the rim and sailed over the fence. His teammate, a shorter, stockier man with a Brooklyn accent, yelled at him loud enough for the women to hear. "Thompson, my grandmother shoots better than you, and she has been dead for 3 years." Everyone laughed, including Thompson. He jogged after the ball, still grinning, still talking back to his teammate with insults that had no real heat behind them. Anna stopped walking completely. She stared at the court like she was seeing something impossible. "They are playing," she whispered in German. "So what?" Marga said, though her voice was uncertain. "So we are at war," Anna said. "Their friends are dying in Europe, right now, today. Men they know are bleeding out in foxholes in France and Germany, and they are here playing basketball." Greta grabbed Anna's arm and pulled her forward. "Do not stare. It is propaganda. They want us to think they are not suffering. They want us to think this is all easy for them." But Anna kept looking back over her shoulder as they walked away. Because in Germany, soldiers did not play games. They drilled. They marched. They stood at attention for hours in all weather until their feet went numb and their backs cramped. They prepared for death with the grim seriousness of men who knew death was coming. They did not laugh. They did not play. They existed in a permanent state of readiness for the next terrible thing. These American soldiers looked like they were preparing for Saturday afternoon pickup games at the neighborhood court. They looked like they were having fun. And for the first time since her capture, a tiny crack appeared in the wall Anna had built around her heart. A small, treacherous voice whispered, "What if everything we were told about Americans was a lie?" She pushed the thought away, but it stayed close, lurking at the edge of her mind, waiting. The mess hall doors stood open. Warm air spilled out into the cold morning, and with it came smells. Coffee. Real coffee, not the ersatz acorn brew they had been drinking in Germany for the past 2 years. Something frying. Something baking. Something rich and fatty and substantial. The smell hit all three women at once. Their stomachs clenched with sudden, desperate hunger that they had been successfully ignoring until this moment. When was the last time they had smelled food, cooking real food? Not thin soup, not sawdust bread, not boiled potatoes that had more rot than flesh. Real food made with ingredients that had flavor and fat and substance. They stepped through the doors into warmth and noise and light. The mess hall was enormous. Long wooden tables arranged in neat rows, metal trays stacked at one end. American soldiers sitting and eating and talking with the casual comfort of men who ate like this every single day. The sounds were ordinary and overwhelming all at once. Silverware clinking against plates, men talking with their mouths full, boots scraping on the wooden floor, a radio in the corner playing music, some big band number with horns and drums. Behind a long counter, cooks in white aprons moved with practiced efficiency, scooping food onto plates, refilling serving trays, calling out to each other about what needed more heat or more seasoning. Steam rose from metal containers. The fluorescent lights overhead were bright enough to hurt eyes that had grown accustomed to dim, flickering bulbs and candlelight. Greta scanned the room like she was mapping enemy territory. Exits here and here, guards there and there, cameras possibly hidden in those corners. This was too organized, too comfortable, too much like a real dining facility instead of a prison mess hall, which meant it had to be a setup, a psychological operation designed to make them soft, make them compliant, make them forget they were the enemy. Anna looked at the soldiers eating, really looked at them. They were not particularly large men, not the blonde Superman propaganda types the Nazi posters always showed. They were just normal, average height, average build, some skinny, some overweight, different colors of skin and hair and eyes. They looked like any random group of men you might see on a street corner, except they were eating like they had never known hunger. Marga looked at the food, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt the full weight of how hungry she actually was. Her stomach hurt. Her head felt light. Her hands trembled slightly. She had gotten very good at ignoring hunger. You had to when food was scarce and meals were uncertain. But the smell of real food cooking broke through all her carefully constructed defenses, and she realized she was starving. Not hungry. Starving. The kind of hunger that makes your body consume itself. the kind that turns your thoughts fuzzy and your movements weak. A cook noticed them standing near the door. He was older than most of the soldiers, maybe mid-30s, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He waved them over. "Ladies," he called out, "do not be shy. Grab a tray. Breakfast is ready." Private James Crawford, the young soldier with a Tennessee accent who had helped Anna with her bag the day before, appeared beside them. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "You sleep okay. Cold last night. Hope the barracks stayed warm enough." The three women stared at him. He was making small talk. Casual, friendly small talk, like they were guests instead of prisoners. Like this was a hotel instead of a POW camp. Like yesterday had not seen them arriving as captured enemy soldiers. Crawford seemed to realize they did not understand him or were too shocked to respond. He pointed toward the food line. "Just grab a tray there and go down the line. The cooks will serve you. Take as much as you want. We have got plenty." Plenty. That word, that impossible word. They had not heard anyone use that word in relation to food since before the war. Plenty meant abundance. Plenty meant more than enough. Plenty meant waste was possible because there was so much you could not eat it all. Plenty was a concept from a different world. Greta did not move. "This is a trick," she hissed in German. "They are testing us, seeing who will take food, who will show weakness." Anna was barely listening. She was watching a soldier 3 tables over eat scrambled eggs. Real eggs. Fluffy yellow eggs that had come from actual chickens. He was eating them with his left hand while reading a newspaper with his right. Casual. Unbothered. Like eggs were so common he could eat them without even paying attention. Marga made a decision. She walked to the stack of trays and picked one up. The metal was cool in her hands. She walked to the serving line. Greta grabbed her arm. "What are you doing?" "I am getting food," Marga said quietly. "Because if they are going to kill me, I would rather die with a full stomach than an empty one." She pulled free and kept walking. Anna followed after a moment of hesitation. Greta stood alone for several seconds, war raging behind her eyes. Pride versus hunger, loyalty versus survival, ideology versus the basic animal need for sustenance. Hunger won. She picked up a tray and followed the other two. The first cook in line was Sergeant Robert Henderson. Buck, 34 years old, former ranch hand from Montana. He had kind hands scarred from years of hard work and a face that had seen things but not lost its basic decency. He looked at the three women and smiled. "Morning, ladies. Hope you are hungry." He did not wait for an answer. He scooped scrambled eggs onto Marga's plate. A full, generous scoop, not measured, not rationed, just an amount that looked right. Then bacon, 4 strips, crispy and glistening with fat. Then toast, 2 slices already buttered, the butter melting into the warm bread. Marga stared at her plate. This was more food than she had seen in a week, maybe 2 weeks. And he had just given it to her without question, without hesitation. Like it was normal. Like feeding enemy prisoners, real eggs and real bacon and real butter was just what you did. The next cook asked a question, but Marga did not understand the words. The cook gestured to a tray of biscuits and another container of thick white gravy studded with chunks of sausage. He was asking if she wanted some. Marga did not know what it was. She had never seen biscuits before. She had never seen sausage gravy, but she nodded because turning down food felt impossible. The cook placed 2 large biscuits on her plate and ladled gravy over them until the biscuits were drowning in the creamy, peppery sauce. Anna received the same. Eggs, bacon, toast, biscuits, and gravy. Coffee poured into a thick ceramic mug. Greta received the same, though her hands shook as she held the tray. They carried their plates to an empty table in the corner. As far from the American soldiers as possible. As far from the windows as possible. Backs to the wall so they could see anyone approaching. They sat, they stared at their food. None of them moved to eat. Steam rose from the biscuits and gravy. The smell was overwhelming. Rich, savory, foreign. The gravy smelled like pepper and cream and pork fat. The bacon smelled like smoke and salt. The eggs smelled like mornings before the war, when breakfast was normal and hunger was just the time between meals instead of a constant aching companion. Greta spoke first. "Do not touch it. It might be drugged." Anna's voice was small. "Why would they drug us? We are not important. We do not know anything valuable." To make us talk, Greta said. To make us compliant. To break our will. Marga looked at her plate and thought about Lotte, thought about her daughter's thin face the last time she had seen her, thought about the letter from her mother describing how little food they had in Munich, thought about 6-year-old Lotte asking when the hunger would stop. And Marga said quietly, I do not care anymore. If I am going to die, I would rather die with a full stomach. She picked up her fork, cut into the biscuit. The gravy was thick and creamy. The biscuit was soft, almost fluffy, nothing like the dense black bread they ate in Germany. She could see chunks of sausage in the gravy. Real meat, real fat. She brought the fork to her mouth, put it in. The taste hit her like a physical blow. The biscuit was soft, softer than anything she had eaten in years. It dissolved on her tongue, buttery and tender and warm. The gravy was rich beyond belief, creamy, peppery, with little bursts of savory sausage that had actual flavor and texture and substance. The fat coated her mouth, the warmth spread through her chest, the sensation of eating something genuinely good, something made with care and quality ingredients, was so overwhelming that her eyes filled with tears. Not because it tasted good, because it tasted like plenty. It tasted like a world where food was abundant enough to be generous, where prisoners could be fed the same quality meals as guards, where fat and meat and butter were used freely instead of rationed down to the gram. It tasted like everything she had been told about America was backwards. The propaganda said Americans were weak and soft and decadent. But if this was decadence, if this was what weakness produced, then maybe strength was not worth having. Anna watched Marga cry and thought, if it is poison, at least she died happy. Anna took a bite and gasped. She had been a nurse. She had studied nutrition in school before the war. She knew that this single breakfast contained more calories and more nutrients than she had eaten in an entire day back in Germany. Maybe 2 days. The eggs alone were a luxury she had not seen in over a year. The bacon was pure protein and fat. The biscuits were carbohydrates and butter. This was fuel for a body to work hard and stay strong, and they were giving it to prisoners. Why Greta held out the longest? 30 seconds, a minute, watching the other two eat, watching tears run down their faces, smelling the food, feeling her stomach cramp with hunger so intense it hurt. She took a small bite of bacon and closed her eyes because it tasted like a lie. Like everything she had been told about America, about the enemy being cruel, about prisoners being starved and broken and tortured, was a lie. And if that was a lie, what else had been a lie? What else had she believed that was not true? The question terrified her more than any interrogation ever could. Across the mess hall, separated from the women by a wooden partition that divided the male and female sections of the POW dining area, sat Hauptmann Werner Adler. Werner was everything Greta aspired to be. 31 years old, former Luftwaffe fighter pilot, decorated officer with an Iron Cross earned in the skies over Britain, aristocratic family from Bavaria, father still serving as a high-ranking Wehrmacht general on the Eastern Front. Werner had been raised in a tradition of military excellence that went back generations. Honor, duty, discipline, loyalty to the fatherland above all else. He sat at a table with 3 junior officers who looked to him for guidance. In front of him was a plate of food identical to what the women had received. Eggs, bacon, toast, biscuits and gravy, coffee, steaming in a mug. Werner had not touched any of it. He had not eaten in 72 hours. His hands rested flat on the table, perfectly still, despite the tremors running through his muscles. His face was pale. His eyes were slightly unfocused. His body was beginning the process of shutting down from lack of food, but his posture was still perfect. Back straight, shoulders square, the bearing of an officer even as his body betrayed him. One of his men, Lieutenant Franz Becker, 24 years old, leaned close and whispered in German, "Sir, you must eat something. You are getting weaker." Werner's voice was steady but quiet. "I am fine. Focus on yourself, but sir, the food is good. Real butter, real meat. When was the last time you had real meat?" "I do not care how good it tastes," Werner said. "It is the enemy's food. Accepting it means accepting their dominance. I will not do that. Sir, with respect, the war is almost over. Germany is losing. You know this." "We do not know what we know until we know it," Werner said. It was a nonsense sentence. His brain was starting to fail from lack of glucose. But he would not admit it, could not admit it, because admitting weakness meant betraying everything he had been taught, everything he believed, everything that made him who he was. Franz exchanged looks with the other two officers. They had been trying to convince Werner to eat for 3 days now. Nothing worked. He was starving himself out of pride, out of loyalty to a regime that had already lost, out of a stubborn refusal to accept kindness from the enemy, because accepting kindness meant acknowledging that the enemy might not be monsters. And if they were not monsters, then what did that make Germany? Across the partition, Greta heard parts of this conversation. She did not hear the words, but she heard the tone. She recognized Werner's voice, hard and certain and uncompromising. She felt a surge of relief. Finally, someone who understands, someone who has not been corrupted by American kindness. She decided that tomorrow she would find a way to speak to Werner, and together they would resist. But Greta did not know that in 3 days she would watch Werner Adler break down sobbing over a slice of apple pie. She did not know that the person who would cause that breakdown was not an interrogator or a guard. It was a 19-year-old farm girl from Iowa who worked in the camp kitchen and made pies the way her grandmother had taught her, with care, with quality ingredients, with love. She did not know that kindness would be the weapon that won this war. After breakfast, the POWs were given work assignments. This was standard procedure under the Geneva Convention. Prisoners could be required to work, but not in dangerous conditions and not in war-related production. The work had to be reasonable, the hours limited, the conditions humane. Greta was assigned to the laundry facility, a large building filled with industrial washing machines and long tables for folding, steam and heat, and the smell of soap. Other German POWs worked there, mostly women chatting in their native language, as they processed endless loads of uniforms and linens. Anna was assigned to the medical clinic as an assistant. She would work with American nurses, doing basic care, bandaging, taking vitals, organizing supplies. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, the head nurse, was 29 years old with a kind face and efficient hands. She spoke slowly and clearly, making sure Anna understood. "You will help me with bandages and supplies and basic care." "Understand?" Anna nodded. "Yes, I understand." "Good," Sarah said. "If you need anything, just ask. We are not here to make your life hard. We are here to keep people healthy." She said it so matter-of-factly, like Anna was a colleague instead of a prisoner, like their countries were not at war, like the fact that Anna had spent the past 3 years treating German soldiers who were trying to kill Americans did not matter now. Marga was assigned to kitchen prep, peeling potatoes, chopping vegetables, basic food preparation under the supervision of the camp cooks. She worked alongside 2 Americans, Corporal Jake Murphy and Private Leon Washington, and one other German. Jake was Irish-American, funny, always talking. Leon was black from Mississippi, quieter but kind. They talked while they worked. Not to the prisoners necessarily, just talking, about home, about their families, about what they missed. Jake said his mother made the best corned beef and cabbage. He swore when he got home, he would eat 3 plates. Leon said he just wanted his wife's pecan pie. She made it every Christmas. He had not had it in 3 years. They were not bragging. They were just missing home. The same way Marga missed home. Leon noticed Marga listening. He smiled. "You got family back home, ma'am?" Marga's English was limited, but she managed. "I have daughter, 6 years. Leon's face softened immediately. 6. That is a good age. I have got a daughter too. She is 4. Have not seen her since she was 2. You miss her? Marga asked carefully. Every single day, Leon said. They peeled potatoes in silence for a moment. Then Leon said something that Marga would think about for weeks. "War is hard on everybody, ain't it? Does not matter which side you are on." Marga did not respond, but she thought about it. Thought about this black American soldier who probably faced discrimination in his own country, who was still fighting for that country, who missed his daughter the same way Marga missed hers. Enemy soldiers, on opposite sides of a war, both just wanting to go home to their children. Maybe the lines were not as clear as the propaganda made them seem. Over the next 3 days, a pattern emerged. Wake at dawn, roll call, breakfast, work assignments, lunch, more work, dinner, free time, lights out. The routine was structured, but not oppressive. The guards were present, but not threatening. The food kept coming, real food, generous portions, more than enough. And slowly against their will, the women began to relax. Not completely, not trustingly, but their shoulders loosened, their hands stopped shaking. They slept better. Their bodies, finally receiving adequate nutrition after months of deprivation, began to heal. Color returned to their faces. Strength returned to their movements. But with physical healing came emotional confusion. On the third night, Greta sat alone in the barracks after lights out, staring at a letter she had started writing to her father. The letter said things she could not send, questions she could not ask, doubts she could not voice. If Americans are the enemy, why do they treat us like people? If we are the victims, why did we start this war? I do not know what to believe anymore. She crumpled the letter, burned it in the pot-bellied stove, watched it turn to ash. But the questions remained. Day 4. Werner Adler had not eaten in 96 hours. He sat on his bunk in the male barracks shaking, not from cold. The barracks were warm, too warm, wastefully warm in his opinion, though his opinion was at the edges. His hands trembled so badly at the edges. His hands trembled so badly he could not hold a pen steady enough to write in his journal. His heart rate was irregular. His thoughts came slow and sticky, like trying to think through mud. He knew intellectually that he was dying, slowly, stupidly, dying from pride while surrounded by abundance. But he could not stop, because stopping meant surrender, and Werner Adler did not surrender. Franz Becker knelt beside his bunk. The younger officer's face was tight with worry. "Sir, please, you have to eat. You are going to die." Werner's voice came out as a whisper. "Better to die German than live American." "That is insane," Franz said, his voice rising. "The war is almost over. Germany is losing. You know this. Everyone knows this. We do not know what we will know until we know it." Werner repeated, the same nonsense sentence from before, his brain's desperate attempt to sound coherent while falling apart. Franz stood. He looked at Werner, this man he had served under for 2 years, this officer he respected and admired, and saw him clearly for the first time. Saw the pride that had become poisonous. Saw the loyalty that had become blindness. Saw a good man being destroyed by his refusal to accept reality. Franz made a decision. The camp medic, Sergeant Bill Harper, came by that afternoon. He was a practical man in his 40s who had seen enough suffering to know when intervention was necessary. He examined Werner without touching him, just looking. The sunken eyes, the gray skin, the way Werner's uniform hung loose on a frame that had lost 15 pounds in 4 days. "He's still refusing food?" Bill asked Franz. "Yes," Bill sighed. "He keeps this up. We will have to force feed him." "I do not want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. But I will if I have to." "Give me 1 more day," Franz said. "I will convince him." "You have got 12 hours, Bill said. "After that, it is out of my hands. We have got rules. Geneva Convention says we have to keep prisoners alive, even if they are trying to kill themselves." After Bill left, Franz sat beside Werner's bunk for a long time, thinking, planning, trying to figure out how to save a man who did not want to be saved. Then he remembered something Werner had said weeks ago before the hunger strike began. They had been talking about home, about Bavaria, about the things they missed. And Werner had mentioned his mother's apple cake, Apfelkuchen, made every Sunday, cinnamon and sugar and tender apples in a buttery crust, the smell filling the house, the taste of home and safety and a world before war. Franz went to the mess hall, found Sergeant Buck Henderson, and explained what he needed. Buck listened without interrupting. Then he went to find the baker. The camp baker was a 19-year-old farm girl from Iowa named Betty Patterson. She had grown up making pies for church socials and county fairs. Had learned from her grandmother, who learned from her grandmother before that. Making pie was not a job to Betty. It was an art form, a way of showing love. And when Buck explained that a German officer was starving himself to death and might be saved by a taste of home, Betty understood immediately. She made the pie that afternoon. Apple, cinnamon, nutmeg, brown sugar, butter in the crust, real butter, not the margarine substitutes. She made it the way her grandmother taught her, with care, with quality ingredients, with the kind of attention that turns food into memory. The next morning, day 5, Franz returned to the barracks carrying a small plate covered with a cloth napkin. The other prisoners watched him with curiosity. Franz sat beside Werner, who was barely conscious now. Eyes half closed, breathing shallow, skin cold despite the warm room. Sir Franz said quietly, "Open your eyes. Leave me alone," Werner whispered. "I have something for you, something from home." Werner's eyes opened slightly, confused, suspicious. Franz uncovered the plate. On it sat a slice of apple pie, still warm from the oven, with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting slowly down the golden brown crust. The smell rose up immediately. Cinnamon, apples, butter, sugar, the exact smell of Sunday mornings in Werner's childhood home, the exact smell of his mother's kitchen, the exact smell of a world that no longer existed. Werner stared at it. "That is American food." "No, Sir Franz said gently. "It is Apfelkuchen, apple cake. My mother made it every Sunday. Your mother probably did too." "My mother," Werner's voice broke on the word. "Your mother would want you to live, sir, not starve yourself for pride." Werner's hand reached out, trembling, stopped halfway, the internal war visible on his face. Reach or resist, live or die, surrender or maintain the fiction that surrender was not inevitable. His hand moved forward again, picked up the fork, lifted it. The weight felt enormous. The simple act of feeding himself had become a moral crisis. He cut a small piece from the tip of the slice where the apples were soft and the cinnamon was strongest, brought it toward his mouth, stopped. His jaw clenched, his eyes closed. And then, with the careful deliberation of a man stepping off a cliff, he put the fork in his mouth. The taste hit him like artillery fire. Not because it was delicious, though it was. Not because he was starving, though he was. But because it was exactly like his mother's Apfelkuchen, the same ratio of cinnamon to sugar, the same texture of apples cooked until tender but not mushy, the same flaky butter crust, the same love baked into every bite. These Americans had made this with love. Not to trick him, not to break him, but because they wanted prisoners to have something good, something that reminded them of home, something that said you are human and humans deserve to eat food that tastes like comfort and care. Werner started to cry. Not delicate tears, not the silent crying he had been trained to suppress. Deep body-shaking sighs that came from a place beyond control. 5 days of hunger, 5 days of pride, 5 days of pretending he was stronger than biology. All of it collapsed at once. The fork clattered to the plate. Both hands came up to cover his face. His whole body bent forward as he wept like a child, like a man whose entire foundation had cracked. Letting his commander break. We were told. Letting his commander break. We were told they were monsters, Werner said between sobs. We were told Americans were brutal and savage and cruel. But they are feeding us our mother's recipes, Franz. They are making Apfelkuchen for prisoners. What does that mean? What does any of this mean? It means maybe we were wrong, Franz said quietly. About a lot of things. If we were wrong about this, Werner said, his voice cracking. What else were we wrong about? Franz had no answer, because that was the question that would haunt all of them. Once you admitted one lie, how many others had to fall? Across the partition in the women's section of the mess hall, Greta watched this happen. She could not hear the words, could not see the details. But she could see Werner Adler, the strongest, most disciplined officer she knew, bent over a table with his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. Could see Franz beside him, hand on his shoulder, not speaking. And something inside Greta shattered. If Werner can break, she thought, then anyone can. If he is wrong, then maybe I am wrong. And if I am wrong about this, about Americans, about the enemy, about everything I was taught, then what else am I wrong about? The question opened a chasm beneath her feet. Because once you start questioning, where do you stop? If the propaganda lied about Americans, what else did it lie about? If the party was wrong about the enemy, what else was it wrong about? If everything you built your identity on turns out to be false, what are you left with? Greta stood abruptly, walked out of the mess hall, walked across the snow-covered grounds until she found an empty space behind one of the equipment sheds. And there, where no one could see, she bent double and vomited. Not from sickness, from the vertigo of watching her entire worldview collapse. That evening, after work assignments, after dinner that Greta barely touched, the three women sat together in the barracks. The sun was setting, golden light came through the windows. Other prisoners were reading or writing letters or talking quietly among themselves. Normal evening activities. like this was a boarding house instead of a prison camp. Anna broke the silence. Did you see the German officer today? In the mess hall? Marga nodded. He was crying. Do you know why, Anna asked? Greta's voice was flat. He ate. After days of refusing, he finally ate. And it broke him. Why would eating break someone, Anna asked. Because it means surrender, Greta said. It means accepting kindness from the enemy. It means admitting that everything we were taught about them might be wrong. And if that is wrong, then what is right? They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Marga said something that changed everything. I do not think they are the enemy anymore. Greta's head snapped toward her. What Marga's voice was steady. I work with them every day, in the kitchen. They talk about their families. They miss their children. They want to go home. They are kind to me even though I am German. Even though my country killed their friends. They are just people, Greta. Not monsters, not demons. Just people who happen to be on the other side of a war. That does not change what they have done, Greta said. The bombings, the deaths, Anna spoke up. And what about what we have done? What about the cities we destroyed? The countries we invaded? Can we really claim moral superiority? We did our duty, Greta snapped. Anna's voice was quiet but firm. But what if our duty was wrong? The question hung in the air like smoke. Greta stood, walked to her bunk, lay down facing the wall. I do not want to talk about this anymore. But she did not sleep. She lay awake all night, staring at the wooden slats of the bunk above her, thinking about Werner Adler, crying over apple pie. Thinking about American soldiers playing basketball while their friends died overseas. Thinking about cooks who made generous portions for prisoners. Thinking about nurses who treated enemy wounded with the same care they gave their own soldiers. Thinking about the possibility that everything she believed was backwards. 3 days later, the camp held a movie night. Recreation was part of the Geneva Convention requirements. Prisoners were entitled to leisure activities. So once a week, the camp showed films in the recreation hall, usually comedies or musicals, nothing heavy, nothing political, just entertainment. This week, they were showing Meet Me in St. Louis, a Technicolor musical about an American family in the early 1900s. The POWs were invited but not required to attend. Most went, out of boredom or curiosity or genuine interest in seeing what American entertainment looked like. Greta, Anna, and Marga sat together in the back row. Before the film started, American guards walked through the aisles handing out small glass bottles of Coca-Cola. The prisoners stared at the bottles like they were artifacts from an alien civilization. Anna had never seen Coca-Cola before. She watched an American soldier twist the cap off, copied the motion, lifted the bottle to her lips, took a sip. Her eyes went wide. She turned to Marga. What is this? Marga had just tasted hers. It is sweet. It is fizzy. It is like nothing I have ever tasted before. Even Greta could not help but smile slightly when she tried it. The sweetness was almost shocking after years of bitter ersatz everything. The carbonation was playful and unexpected. It was excess in liquid form, sugar and flavor and enjoyment for enjoyment's sake. The movie started. The women watched transfixed, not because the plot was groundbreaking. It was not. A family dealing with the prospect of moving to New York. Daughters worried about boys. A father balancing work and family. Standard domestic comedy musical fare. But it showed normal American life. A family eating dinner together with no fear and no rations. Just abundance. Daughters arguing about dresses and dances, not about soldiers or survival. A father working a regular job, not war production or military service. Christmas celebrations with presents wrapped in paper and a tree covered in ornaments, and food spread across a table until it groaned. This was what Americans fought for. Not conquest, not domination, not expansion of territory or ideology. They fought to protect this. Normal life, family dinners, Christmas trees, the freedom to be ordinary. Anna whispered to Marga, "Is this what America is really like?" "I do not know," Marga said, "but I want it to be." After the movie, walking back to the barracks under a sky full of stars, Greta spoke. "I think we lost the war a long time ago. We just did not know it yet." "Why do you say that?" Marga asked. "Because you cannot beat people who live like that," Greta said. "People who have so much they can give it away. People who are so free they make movies about families instead of propaganda about soldiers. You cannot beat that with tanks and guns. You can only beat it by becoming it. And we never tried to become it. We tried to destroy it. That is why we lost. Then what do we do now? Anna asked. I do not know, Greta said, but I know I cannot go back to who I was before I came here. On May 7th, 1945, the camp loudspeakers crackled to life. All prisoners were ordered to assemble in the main yard. Guards lined the perimeter, not threatening, just present, watchful. Colonel William Patterson, the camp commander, stepped onto a raised platform. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray hair and a face that had seen too much war. He spoke clearly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. I have an announcement. As of 11:01 this morning, the German High Command signed an unconditional surrender to the Allied forces. The war in Europe is over. Complete silence. Then reactions rippled through the crowd like waves. Some prisoners collapsed to their knees. Some cried. Some stood frozen in shock. Some whispered finally as if they had been holding their breath for years. Marga thought Lotte. I can go home to Lotte, Anna thought. Is my family still alive? To go home to Greta thought. We lost. We actually lost. It is real now, no more hoping for a miracle. No more believing in last-minute reversals. Germany surrendered. We lost. Colonel Patterson continued, you will remain here until repatriation can be arranged. This may take weeks or months. During that time, you will continue to be treated according to the Geneva Convention. You will be fed, housed, and cared for. No one will be harmed. I give you my word as an officer and a man. He paused. Let the words settle. I know many of you are worried about your families. We will do everything we can to help you contact them through the Red Cross. And I want you to know something else. The fact that Germany has surrendered does not make you our enemies forever. War is temporary. Humanity is permanent. Remember that. He stepped down. The assembly dispersed slowly, prisoners moving like sleepwalkers, trying to process what this meant. The war was over. Their country had lost. Their lives could begin again. Or maybe their lives were over. Maybe there was nothing to go back to. 3 days later came the hardest moment of their captivity, the educational presentations. All German POWs were required to attend. They were led into a large room with a projector and a screen. An American officer stood at the front, Captain David Klein, 34 years old, Jewish, from New York. His entire extended family had been in Poland, past tense. Captain Klein spoke in clear German. What you are about to see is not propaganda. It is not exaggeration. It is footage taken by Allied forces as they liberated concentration camps across Germany and Poland. I am showing you this not to make you feel guilty. I am showing you this so you understand what you are part of, what your government did in your name. If anyone needs to leave, you can. But I encourage you to stay, because this is the truth, and the truth matters. No one left. The lights went down, the projector hummed to life, and for 20 minutes the prisoners saw hell. Bodies piled like cordwood, living skeletons with eyes that had seen too much, mass graves, gas chambers, children, so many children, hollow-eyed and skeletal and dead or dying or wishing they were dead. No narration, just images. The truth speaking for itself. Some prisoners covered their eyes. Some vomited. Some wept. Some sat frozen, unable to look away, unable to process what they were seeing. Greta watched every second, forced herself to look, to see, to know, because she needed to understand what she had been part of, what her work had enabled, what her obedience had made possible. When the film ended, the lights came up slowly. The room was silent except for crying. Captain Klein spoke quietly. I know what you are thinking. I did not do this. I did not know. And maybe that is true. Maybe you did not know, but your government did, your leaders did, and they counted on people like you, good people, loyal people, to look the way while it happened. Anna stood. Her legs shook, but her voice was clear. I was a nurse. I saved people. I did not know this was happening. I swear I did not know. Captain Klein's voice was gentle. I believe you. But I am still German, Anna said. I am still responsible, yes, Captain Klein said. You are responsible for what happens next, for making sure this never happens again. That is your responsibility. Marga stood. I have a daughter, 6 years old. She will learn about this. In school, yes, Captain Klein said. Everyone will. Good, Marga said. She must know, so she never lets it happen again. Greta did not stand, but she spoke from her seat. I worked for Vermont Communications. I transmitted orders. I did not ask what they meant. I just obeyed. How many people died because I obeyed? Captain Klein looked at her directly. I do not know, and you will never know. That is what you will have to live with. But you are asking the question. That is more than most people did during the war. That night, none of the women slept. They lay in their bunks, staring at the ceiling, processing, grieving, carrying new weight that would never leave. Finally, Anna spoke into the darkness. How do I go home, knowing what we did? We did not do it, Greta said. The regime did. We were part of the regime, Anna said. We worked for it. We believed in it. Silence. Then Marga said, when I get home, how do I explain this to Lottie? How do I tell a 6-year-old that her country did these things? You tell her the truth, Greta said. You tell her so she never becomes what we were. And what were we? Marga asked. Complicit, Greta said. Even if we did not know we were complicit, we looked away. We obeyed without questioning. We trusted authority that did not deserve trust. So what do we do now? Anna asked. We remember, Greta said. We carry this. And when we go home, we make sure Germany never forgets either. In July of 1945, 2 months after the war ended, the women received their repatriation orders. They would be sent home, back to Germany, back to whatever remained of the country they had left. Before they departed, something unexpected happened. The American staff held a small farewell ceremony. Sergeant Buck Henderson found Marga in the kitchen. Ma'am, I heard you have a daughter back home. Yes, Marga said. Lotte, she is 6. Buck pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. My wife and I put together some things for her. Candy bars, a little doll, some colored pencils. I know it is not much, but we wanted her to have something from America that was not about the war. Marga stared at the package. Why? Why do you do this? Because she is 6, Buck said, and 6-year-olds should not have to suffer for what adults did. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell gave Anna a medical textbook. I know you are a good nurse. Keep studying. When you get home, Germany is going to need healers more than ever. But this is expensive, Anna said. I cannot pay. It is a gift, Sarah said. Just promise me you will use it to help people. All people, not just Germans. I promise, Anna said. Corporal Frank O'Brien gave Greta a pocket-sized copy of the United States Constitution. Read this. Really read it. Understand what we believe in. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to question authority. Maybe someday Germany will have something like this. Maybe, Greta said, taking it carefully. The morning they left, trucks lined up outside the camp gates. The women stood with hundreds of other German prisoners holding small bags containing everything they owned. The gifts from Americans. The memories of months in captivity that felt more like refuge. As Greta climbed into the truck, she looked back at Fort McCoy one last time. The barracks where she had slept warm. The mess hall where she had eaten well. The laundry where she had worked beside Americans who treated her with basic human decency. I do not want to leave, she whispered. Neither do I, Marga said. But we must, Anna said. We have to go home and fix what is broken. The journey back took 3 weeks. By ship across the Atlantic. By train through a Europe still smoking from war. When they finally arrived in Germany, what they found was worse than they had imagined. Hamburg was rubble. Stuttgart was devastated. Berlin was divided. Munich was shattered. Cities reduced to broken concrete and twisted metal, and displaced people searching for anyone they used to know. Marga found her mother and daughter living in the basement of a bombed church. When Lotte saw her, the little girl hesitated. A year is a long time in a child's life, long enough to forget faces. But then, Mama, yes, Liebling, it is Mama. They held each other and cried. Later, Marga gave Lotte the gifts from Sergeant Buck. The little girl's eyes went wide. Chocolate, real chocolate, yes, Marga said, from America. But are Americans not bad? Lotte asked. No, sweetheart? Marga said, We were wrong about that, very wrong. Anna found her childhood home destroyed. Neighbors told her that her mother had died in a bombing raid in 1944. Her brother was still missing, presumed dead. Anna was alone, but she remembered Sarah Mitchell's words. Germany will need healers. She found the nearest hospital and walked in. I am a nurse. Put me to work. They did. Greta returned to Berlin to find her father alive but broken, under investigation for war crimes. The process would eventually clear him, but the damage was done. What did they do to you in America, her father asked. They fed me, Greta said. They treated me with respect, and they showed me the truth about what we did. Propaganda, her father said. No, father. Truth. And you know it. He did not respond. But she saw in his eyes that he did know, had always known, and had looked away. 20 years later, in 1965, Marga's daughter Lotte visited the United States as part of a student exchange program. She found Sergeant Buck Henderson, now retired in Montana. She brought him a letter from her mother. Thank you for saving my daughter's childhood. Buck cried when he read it. Anna became head nurse at Stuttgart Hospital. In 1955, she traveled to America and met Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, now a civilian. They became lifelong friends. Anna dedicated her career to training young nurses. Her motto, heal everyone, even enemies. Greta taught history for 40 years, wrote a memoir in 1960, From Propaganda to Truth, A German Woman's Journey. The book was controversial but widely read. She never stopped telling students, question authority, seek truth, choose kindness. She died in 1985 at age 68. Her last words, I am grateful I was captured. This story is not just about World War II. It is about a choice we all face every single day. Do we meet hatred with hatred, or do we meet it with something stronger? The American guards at Fort McCoy could have treated German prisoners with cruelty. No one would have blamed them, not after what Germany had done, but they chose differently. They chose to treat prisoners like human beings, to feed them well, to show them kindness, to challenge them with truth instead of breaking them with violence. And that choice transformed lives. Greta Hoffman came to America believing propaganda. She left believing in truth. Anna Weber came believing she was beyond hope. She left believing in healing. Marga Klein came fearing for her daughter's future. She left determined to build a better one. Werner Adler came ready to die for pride. He left ready to live for something greater. The lesson of Fort McCoy is simple but profound. Kindness is not weakness, it is power. Truth is not cruelty, it is freedom. And treating enemies like humans does not make you soft. It makes you strong. These are American values. Values that the greatest generation, many of you watching, or your fathers and grandfathers fought to defend. Values that matter just as much today as they did in 1945. If this story moved you, please share it. Because in a world that often chooses division, we need to remember what happens when we choose kindness instead. And if you served during World War II or knew someone who did, please leave a comment. Tell us your story, because these stories matter. They are proof that we can be better than our worst impulses. Thank you for watching. God bless you. And God bless the values that make America worth defending.